campaigns nearly for almost 19 years. From boots on the ground, volunteering at high-level campaign management strategy, she understands the ins and outs of a winning campaign. Her experience includes the campaigns of Congressman William R. Keating, Senator Daniel Wolf, former State Representative Cleon H. Turner, and former Councilor James Cote. She is the principal of Nexus Werx LLC and previously chaired the Cape Cod Young Professionals CCYP Civic Engagement Committee.
Good morning. Thank you. Actually, it hasn't been 19 years. It's been since I was 19. But close enough. So I'm here today to help you fit all of this information that you're getting together in a comprehensive way that helps you make sense of the building blocks that go into a successful campaign. You will hear, if you choose to run for office, everyone has an opinion, and you'll hear lots of different advice about what you ought to be doing. It's really important for you to understand the why behind the different pieces of advice that you're going to get so you can sort out effective campaigning, effective methodology from campaign mythology. So today you're going to hear about targeting your voters, developing a message, delivering your message, identifying your supporters, and getting them to the polls. I'm just going to draw your attention to the PowerPoint that we're going to be doing. So I mentioned building blocks. This is your pyramid. You start at the bottom with developing a persuasive message, something you think is going to move the needle and get voters to support you, and then identifying who it is that the likely voters are. And then it's delivering your message to those likely voters and identifying who's going to support you. And then once you've identified who your supporters are, when it comes time for Election Day, you have to GOTV, get out the vote, which leads to, hopefully, you win. All right, so you may or may not have heard of the term targeting. What it comes down to is in every campaign, you have limited resources, some more than others. For most candidates, money is a limited resource. Shirley talked a little bit about the need to fundraise. I absolutely echo that sentiment. However, with local races, your costs are going to be lower because your universe, who you're targeting, is going to be smaller. That being said, you still need to learn all of the rules governing fundraising, so I encourage you to check out the Office of Campaign and Political Finance at the Secretary of State's website. But the most limited resource that you're going to face, and everyone, it's universal, is time. So all this means when it comes to targeting is narrowing down the list of people that you need to deliver your message to and convincing them to vote for you. So since time is limited, you're not going to talk to everybody in town. You could, but that's not the best use of your time. You don't need to talk to summer people. They can't vote for you. So you narrow it down a little bit more. Again, you could talk to all the voters in town, but this is a presidential election year coming up. There are people who only vote in presidential election years, and they don't vote down the bottom of the ticket, and they don't know who is running. If you're running in a town election, your town election is going to be in the springtime when a very small subset of this group is going to be paying attention. Therefore, you need to narrow it down to who your likely voters are. Terry talked about the relationship that you as a candidate will have with your town clerk. I really emphasize building that relationship because they can help you with getting the voter list, the voter file, and helping you narrow it down. So when you're determining your likely voters, it's generally for, if you're running for school committee, if you're running for Board of Selectmen, Board of Health, et cetera, you're looking for people who have voted in 1 of 3 or 2 of 4 of the last town elections. Those are your likely voters. That is your universe. And you can talk to everyone else after the campaign. So, what does a message do? Simply put, it takes this guy here in the undecided likely voter column and it moves him over to the supporter column. That's that box that you live in, is that undecided likely voter column. Your message doesn't spend time trying to convince people who support your opponents that they should vote for you, because that's a really hard sell. Why would you try to do that when there are plenty of undecided likely voters? And it also similarly doesn't mean that you spend time talking to those unlikely presidential voters. It's just not the most efficient use of your time. This is the box you live in. So what is a message? Simply put, it's the combination of you plus voter sentiment plus election conditions. It's what's going to move the needle. A few things that it's not a slogan, it's not a sign. It's not the issues, though the issues, as Shirley mentioned, definitely feed into the messaging. It's not your biography, though that again feeds into it. But what it is something that persuades voters that you're the best for the job. It helps you stand out from the rest of the pack. It also insulates you and takes into account what could your opponent say about themselves, what could they say about you, and it comes together as the strongest message, considering all the variables of what could be said in that campaign. Lastly, because you're not running in a vacuum, you have to take into account what is going on in the voters' minds. Certainly you can't read their minds, but you can talk to them and find out what are the top issues that are going on in town, what are they worried about, what are they passionate about, what are they excited about. Okay, who remembers this? Not that long ago, so it shouldn't be too far in your memory. In 2008, then candidate Obama ran, and does everyone remember his message? Probably not. Most of you may think that it was hope and change, but I'm going to tell you that was not his message. His message was everything is really messed up right now, and you can't trust those guys, whether it be Clinton or McCain, you can't trust them to fix it. So you need an outsider to fix it. I'm going to say it again. Everything's really messed up right now. You can't trust those guys, so you need an outsider. Now, you never directly heard that in his speeches or his ads or his literature, but if you think about the slogan of hope and change, why would you need hope and change if everything's okay? It wasn't. Think back to what was going on in 2008. We had the financial collapse, the housing bubble burst, and it really seemed that politicians not only didn't have the answers, but might have contributed to the problems. So he was tapping into that anxiety that was going on in the voters and that mistrust of inside the Beltway. In his case, he was able to do extensive polling to help him determine what was the message that was going to move the needle. But you, as municipal candidates, don't need to do that. You can still come up with a good message. Here's an example. So we're going to call our hypothetical candidate Jessica. She's running for school committee, and there are two incumbents, two seats that are up. So it's a three-way race. One of the incumbents has to lose in order for her to win. One of the conditions that's going on in the community is that the district has had an influx of younger people. Boy, I wish this was reality on the Cape and not a hypothetical, but there's been an influx, and so they're going to be building a new high school. She doesn't have any municipal experience. Her opponents certainly do. They have municipal experience and they have longtime experience on the school committee. But she is the only candidate with a background in finance. She's an accountant. And she served on the PTA. She also has her kids in school, still in the school district, unlike her opponents. All three of them graduated from the high school, and she's been talking to enough of the voters to know that there is some concern and anxiety about where this high school is going to go in terms of the cost, and are the costs going to overrun? How's it going to be managed? Is there a potential for an override? So incumbents have So that's the situation. So that's our scenario. So what does Jessica do? She figures out what distinguishes her from the rest of the pack, what insulates her against attacks, and what will persuade voters that she's the right person to address their passions or their concerns. So for Jessica, she's not going to talk about graduating from the high school because, except maybe in passing, because the other candidates can say the same thing. She knows that her opponents are going to talk about their years of experience, and the inverse of that is that she is inexperienced. They could say that about her. But she thinks that that's an asset for her because of this, because the voters aren't completely convinced the current leadership will do the job well. The voters are concerned about new taxes, and so she's decided she's going to focus in on what makes her different and how that will address the voters' concerns. So you can see the questions that you need to ask yourself. This is the exercise that really writing all these things down will help you come up with what an efficient message, a really effective message is. So Jessica determines that her message is, the school committee needs a parent to bring fiscal oversight and build trust with the voters. So one of the key pieces here is the fiscal oversight. She's tapping into that need for management and oversight and using her credentials as an accountant to prop up her position. Now, when she's going out and talking to the voters, she's not saying that verbatim. What she is saying is, accountant, parent, leader for ABC schools. That's probably her slogan. When she goes and she meets with John Q. Voter, she starts off introducing herself as a parent and an accountant who has been involved in the PTA and wants to make sure that the new high school is handled responsibly. So that is her message. Now, as far as integrating your message, this is a point that I can't emphasize enough, which is that once you've decided on a message, it is really important to stick to it and to have it permeate all of your conversations with voters, all of your literature, your Facebook. Everything needs to be consistent. That includes also your elevator pitch. You may have had those for sales or something else, but it's really important to, in 30 or 60 seconds, be able to introduce yourself, deliver your message, and not have people's eyes glaze over, or think that you really like to talk about yourself. And Jessica is going to be talking about her experience, and Shirley talked about how when you are out there as a candidate, you are marketing yourself. It really is a marketing campaign. You are talking to the voters as if they are customers. So just like with advertising, it comes down to repetition, repetition, repetition. Okay, so we talked about your most limited resource being time. How do you use it the most effectively? Well, that's going where the voters are, right? So Willie Sutton, when asked why he robbed banks, answered, because that's where the money is. So why are you going to go to voters' homes? Because that's where the voters are. You could, when you are getting your nomination paper signed, you could go to grocery stores. It's not a bad place, but you could possibly run into summer people, people from other towns. Transfer stations and post offices are great spots for getting your nomination papers signed and have that first introduction to the voters. Town meeting, you're definitely going to have likely voters showing up there. But if this is the first time that they have met you, then your campaign is in trouble because usually town meeting takes place about a week before the town election. So this is a great place to lock up your vote. The best place, though, is at home, where the voters live. And we talked about how the town clerk can provide you with a voters list. That includes their home addresses. So you can come up with a walk list and you go knocking on their door. Here's why. We go back to what the goal is. It's getting enough of your supporters to get out and vote on election day so that you win. In order to do that, you need to talk to the voters, the ones who are going to show up, and you need to convey your message. But then the next piece of that is you need to find out if you've persuaded them and where they stand. If they're leaning towards supporting you, if they're leaning towards supporting your opponent, if they're undecided and need another touch point. And you need to mark that down. You need to write it down. When you're talking to them, when you are going and knocking on their door, or talking to them on the phone, you need to ask them, can I count on your support? It's a really important question to ask, because how else are you going to identify who your supporters are? So the only way to be able to have two-way communication is knocking on doors and phone calls. There are people who, on the national level and even internationally, who are working on developing new ways at having this two-way communication with voters through social media and other means, but no one has perfected it yet. So this is the tried and true method. We know it works. We also know nobody really likes receiving or making those phone calls around election time. Thankfully, when you're running for local office, you're not going to have a deluge of calls. But it's the only way you're going to have that two-way communication. Lastly, when we're talking about marketing and we're talking about repetition, you have the two-way communication, but then you can also have one-way communication that's targeted at the same group of likely voters and delivering your message. And there are a very limited number of ways to do that really effectively. One of them is direct mail. The reason that I prefer direct mail over other means is because you know exactly which household the mail is going to. You know it's going to likely voters. Whereas with other means, you're spreading yourself more thin. You're having a wider net, and it's not as targeted. But you do need to do just a cost-benefit analysis of the cost of sending direct mail versus the cost of advertising in your local paper to determine what is going to be the most effective for your campaign. At this point, you may have people come up to you and say, I'm sick of hearing from you. I'm sick of hearing about your message about fiscal oversight for the school committee. Good. If people are sick of hearing from you, you're doing your job well. The people who are sick of hearing from you, the ones who are really, really, really paying attention, you need to get to the people who are kind of sort of paying attention. And that's, again, why the repetition is so important. So if you do decide to do a piece of direct mail, there are a couple of guidelines. First of all, it needs to be, again, integrating the message. Can't emphasize that enough. And it's really great to be proud of all that you have done for your community, but you need to leave space on it. So putting your entire resume and the year you graduated high school and your GPA is not going to grab the voters' attention the way a clear piece of literature is going to. Voters get a lot of stuff in the mail. They've got their bills, they've got their ads, they've got magazines. So you need to have something that's going to stand out and be very clear. And then Shirley also mentioned this, talk to your postmaster. You want to find out what's the last day you can drop the piece in the mail before it arrives before Election Day. If it arrives after Election Day, it doesn't do you any good and you've wasted money. So, what's an example of some direct mail? Florence and the Machine. Our very own Florence Selden. I adore this piece. I absolutely love it. It's a little tongue-in-cheek. It's not necessarily what you would normally do, but I love it for a couple of reasons. First of all, her name is very clear. I mean, these are things that you'd be surprised people forget. The office that she's running for is right up front. The date of the election is up front. You know, people can put that on their, a magnet up on their refrigerator and remember the day to vote for her. It asks for her vote. You know, that's a really important piece that we haven't talked too much about, but, you know, when you're going out and delivering your message, don't forget to ask for people's vote. And there is actually a very clear message here. You know, Rosie the Riveter and Florence are both go-getters. We can do it. Well, collectively, we can address the issues facing Chatham, and Florence is the woman to take the leadership role on that. I look at that, and I say, that's someone I want to get behind. So, you've delivered your mail, you've talked to the voters, you've identified your list of people who said that they would support you. Now what? What do you need to do? Simple. You need to get out the vote. You may have heard of GOTV and Get Out the Vote. It's really simple. All it is is taking that narrowed down universe and getting down to your supporters and spending the weekend and the day leading up to Election Day talking to those voters, picking up the phone and saying, hi, Sally Smith, you said that you were going to support me. This is Jessica. You said you'd support me. Just want to remind you, Tuesday's Election Day. I really need your support and your vote. It's going to be a tight race. Can I count on you showing up on Election Day? Do you need a ride to the polls? And then following up and harassing her a few more times to make sure that she actually shows up. So that's pretty much the basics. So let's put it all together. You found a message that will persuade the voters to support you. You've targeted the voters who are likely to show up on Election Day. You've engaged with them through direct contact, and you've asked them to support you. And now you get your supporters out on Election Day. This is the formula for a successful campaign. This is what experts the world over use, that has been studied to death, and there are countless studies out there. I'm sure you can find some data out there. But this is the basic structure. You can add, you can subtract, but keep in mind this is the building blocks, and they all build on each other. We call it campaign strategy for a reason. So please try to be as strategic as possible in developing and delivering your message. Good luck, and thank you for considering running. We need you. So, if you need any more information, please visit my website,